This is Mr. C, and I've got a quick breakdown of the Federalist papers 10 and 51 and Brutus 1. You need to know the big takeaways. I'm going to give you a few key quotes that should help crystallize those takeaways, but what you need to know for the AP exam is what the most important arguments each of these papers try to advance, so you can use those arguments yourself. Let's go. Federalist 10, remember it. Fact tensions. Publius, the author, he promises only a large republic can cure the mischiefs of factions. Federalist 10, he says, ultimately, factions are inevitable. He puts it, the latent causes of faction are thus sown in the nature of man. There are many causes of faction, but wealth inequality is the largest divider. The most common and durable source of factions, Madison writes, has been the various and unequal distribution of property. But he's got a promise that this large, diverse republic could minimize the dangers posed by factions, writing, a republic, by which I mean a government in which the scheme of representation takes place, opens a different prospect and promises the cure for which we are seeking. How is it going to do that? He notes, minority factions, they're controlled by the majority rule principle in a representative democracy. Writing, if a faction consists of less than a majority, relief is supplied by the Republican principle, which enables the majority to defeat its sinister views by regular vote. What about tyranny of the majority, a majority faction? Well, he explains that the large size and diversity of this new country under the Constitution will make it impossible for nationwide majority factions to form. Writing, the influence of factious leaders may kindle a flame within their particular states, but will be unable to spread a general conflagration through the other states. Now, Federalist 51, Publius, Madison, is writing on that separation of powers. Headline of it, to keep government power in check, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. This is about separation of powers, checks and balances. On separation of powers, he writes, each department branch should have a will of its own and consequently should only be so constituted that the members of each should have as little agency as possible in the appointment of the members of the others. Each of these branches should be separate and shouldn't be able to control the other ones and how the people running those other branches get their jobs. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. Clearly, this is rhetorical, that we need internal controls. And here comes the checks and balances. This new government under the Constitution has been artfully designed so that its several constituent parts may, by their mutual relations, be the means of keeping each other in their proper places. The very design bakes it in. And ambition must be made to counteract ambition. We don't have angels, we have ambitious people. Assume that, bake it into the system. And then the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. And that's what he's arguing, that this structure with separated powers and federalism is going to keep the government from becoming tyrannical, is going to allow the government power to be checked and limited. Brutus 1 comes back with a brutal takedown. Ultimately, the anti-federalists lost, but Brutus still had some very powerful points that still resonate today. Ultimately, he said this new proposed government will possess absolute and uncontrollable power. He wrote, this government is to possess absolute uncontrollable power, legislative, executive, and judicial. These three branches, he says, they're going to be too powerful. They got this supremacy clause in Article 6, the supreme over the states that he was so attached to. It goes on, in a large republic, the public good is sacrificed to 1,000 views. This new broad national government, is democracy truly going to be possible? Well, he thought there would be gridlock, there'd be disunity. Some would say we see that. Finally, Brutus comes in, there will be a constant clashing of opinions, and the representatives of one part will be continually striving against those of another. He's arguing that the country is going to be torn apart by regional differences and disputes. Maybe he saw the Civil War coming, or the current conflict between red and blue states, this divide that's seen in the United States in the 21st century. Brutus ultimately argued that this central government was going to crush the beloved states that had so recently been sovereign under the Articles of Confederation, writing, all that is reserved for the individual states must very soon be annihilated. The 10th Amendment came along. Was it enough to really put to rest these fears? And then by this clause, meaning the necessary and proper clause, by this clause invested with the power of making all laws proper and necessary for carrying all these into execution, and they may so exercise this power as entirely to annihilate all the state governments and reduce this country to one single government. He's writing is this so-called Federalists were really proposing a government that would become unitary, that the state governments were really not going to have any meaningful power. There was going to be centralized authority, and it would become oppressive. This necessary proper clause particularly opened the doors wide for abuse by this new, very powerful central government. So there you go. Federalist 10, Federalist 51, Brutus 1 broken down. Federalist 10, all about factions and how this new government's going to fix them. Federalist 51 about separation of powers and checks and balances are going to preserve limited government. And Brutus 1 trying to poke holes in these arguments and show that this new constitutional government could truly be dangerous. Thank you. Stay safe and stay sharp.